All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. And today, because it's been a while, stuff keeps getting in the way. We're going to talk The Shadow Rising, get back to that. I think we've decided that we're going to do these next like four or so chapters in order, but then we're going to get out of chronological order and go in story order because things are going to split up here into three separate stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems better, simpler, makes more sense for us to take those stories individually. And I think we'll be able to delve a little deeper and more detailed in each one that way.
Okay, while you're starting and setting the stage, let me check comments.
Although there is a bit of a side story, what we were just talking about, because here in the next chapter, we're going to take a little detour to the White Tower, and that's going to pop in and out here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But
and we could probably figure out where those spots will be relative to what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there are kind of six main characters, and we've kind of complained more in the spoiler talk that they don't always get the full attention we think they deserve. But the three young men, the three young women, their storylines really drive the overarching plot and the action of the whole series. And so those are the six we're going to follow throughout the series, really, as they kind of break off and do things. And that's actually one of my first thoughts here is, so the opening chapter, Leave Takings, and we start with Perrin, and it just kind of dawned on me that I don't know that I'd ever really thought about it in these terms before, but I don't think it's an accident, because RJ plans so much that we overthink it. Every once in a while you run into an accident. If you look through his his commentary, his answers to questions, and people will ask him these really weird detailed questions, and they'll go, oh no, I wasn't meaning that at all. I didn't do that on purpose at all. Every once in a while you'll run into that, but so much, that's why we overthink, because so much was actually planned. Anyway, so it dawned on me that Perrin is all alone last book. Rand runs off on his own, trying to, make things come to a head in his mind, put an end to it one way or another. Of course, it doesn't end. It's just the end of the beginning. And then Matt is off on his own because he has to go back to the White Tower to be healed, and then he gets caught up in things. So Perrin is the first one on his own, and he's not completely on his own, obviously, because he still has Moiraine and Land there to help and guide him. He still has Loyal there as a friend, and as someone who's a little more knowledgeable in the world. And then he meets Faile, who's going to become his kind of partner, companion, complementary person. And now he's about to go off on his own, like for real, like on his own initiative. And I don't think it's an accident that kind of prologued in The Dragon Reborn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to one of the comments from Scott, he talks about the foreshadowing, and he was kind of ranting a little bit in his comment against a lot of the kind of Jordan haters out there that say he was making it up as he went along. He said, this is exactly the evidence. I'm paraphrasing what he said.
Yeah.
He said, it's pretty much exactly the evidence that he had a plan going throughout. Because there's so much in the first book that you see 10 books later. I mean, there's at least an outline, right? And when we get to Sanderson, he talks about there were chapters written for the latest books by Jordan. Some of those chapters weren't even written by Sanderson. They were already written. So he kind of had this plan, and he probably couldn't get it out of his head until he wrote it down.
Well,
and
he said a couple of different times that he had the very last scene in his head, like he could see it perfectly.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what was lost in translation there, because I just have to imagine Jordan would have done that better, because you're just in the end, and this is spoiler territory, but we're not going to say what happened, but you are kind of like,
what
that was weird. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was weird.
Yeah. Well, so
And it makes sense from all the
Yes.
foreshadowing standpoint, because there were so many things that were like, how is that going to work? Is this a metaphor, or is this, something else that
yeah, the point being that yes, he didn't know all the details and he had to figure out certain things as he went along, but the overarching idea of the story, of course he had a plan, because he actually worked backwards.
yeah.
He started with the end. He had this vision in his head of the end, and he thought, well, how does that happen? And then he kind of came up with the idea of the chosen one, but kind of turned on its head a little bit. And so he kind of worked backwards of, okay, well, how would that happen? And then how would that happen? So he started with the last effect and then cause and affected himself back to the root cause.
Mhm. And sorry, we didn't reply a whole lot. I only had a notification that there were 3 comments, but I just looked through and there were quite a few more than 3. So I'll I don't know how the notifications pop up. And again, if we're slow on those, we don't get on YouTube except when we do these videos, because we both work full time and have been spending a lot of time studying and stuff. So we'll get the hang of it, and we'll be faster about that and try to be better at actually replying to them before we do another video. But I like this concept of addressing them as we do the video too, in the spoiler section.
Was there anything else, or
most of the comments were in spoiler territory, so we'll get to those. And one of them involved the quotes from Jordan, so I'll bring those up as you're talking on some of these parts, so we can actually, so I can actually show the direct quotes, or Sanderson as well. And I think one of them involves Harriet. But yeah, we'll get through that. But as far as Perrin going on his own, he still has Loyal. So that's important. And you brought up Faile being integral, and she is more wise in the ways of the world than Perrin is, although he's learning quickly.
Yeah.
And then just for those that have read ahead, he's going to encounter someone else who's kind of like, in a lot of this whole story in the past and going forward, is a surrogate Moiraine, which is Baron. And so we still have that interaction. It's just through who I think is actually a cooler character that gets involved with in the Perrin development story.
Yeah. And we've already seen a little bit of that, again, back to the planning, because she becomes part of that conspiracy cabal of trying to guide the Dragon Reborn with Siwan and Moiraine back in the Great Hunt. So their partnerships becomes a triumvirate, and now she's going to pop back in working on this. And it just dawned on me again, I don't know that we ever encounter this per se, but there's a lot of 3s in this series. There's the 3 young women. They form kind of a group, and they, even when they're not together, they are in communication and they are working towards the same goals. We have the 3 young men who are all 3 ta'veren, and then we have the 3 Moiraine, Siwan, Verin, who are the ones who know about the dragon and are working from the very beginning to try and help him achieve his destiny. Although that kind of doesn't go the way they plan and intend.
Well, Nikolai Tesla, if you see the world in 3s and 6s, it all makes sense. And no one knows what that means. Though I've seen a lot of mathematical shenanigans around that people are like, this is what he means, and this is what, and they all work mathematically, but it's still kind of
aliens. But
aliens. Yeah. All these people doing the mathematical work on that look like they could.
So something I ranted about last time when I was talking about strong female characters is Perrin does still have help and assistance and guidance, but he has his own agency. That last time he was on his own, he was separated from his Two Rivers friends, but he was following Moiraine. This time, yes, he has people helping him, but those people are his followers. He's instigating the action now. So he's basically, he's grown up.
Is he instigating the action with Faile?
Well, but that's why they're complementary. And in
Mhm.
fact, speaking of foreshadowing, something I didn't mention last time because it's going to pop up here is that section from her perspective. She thinks Ogier oath, and she gets an idea, but we're not told what it is yet. And now we see it here, where she has schemed to not let Perrin push her away. That she's not mad at him, and this is what's complicated and interesting about her character, but also sometimes annoying because of the kind of, and I don't know, the Saldean female personality. Do you know of any real world example like that, or any psychology example like that? Because that to me is interesting and bizarre. The way he describes their particular personality,
Mhm.
um, and how they act. So she's smart enough that she knows what Perrin's doing. Perrin doesn't mean what he says. He's not, actually making eyes at Elayne. He's not actually done with her and wants her to go away. She knows he's trying to push her away, but she's still mad at him for that.
There is one of the differences between Jordan and people like Tolkien is Jordan drew a lot more from Eastern cultures.
Yeah.
And you do see some of that where mama's boss at home, but daddy's boss in public in a lot of ways. And there's very little literature because there was so little written out of this culture. And the kind of gets overshadowed by the way Genghis Khan was with his womanizing. But
That's
there's
one way to put it.
yeah. There's the theory is a big giant percentage of us have Genghis's genetics in us because of the way he was. But the Mongolian culture before and during and after him, the way the women are in the battlefield with the Saldeans is similar to the way they were there. And there's hints at it. Again, the men dominated the writing, so you don't they're not going to say we bowed to our women or whatever, but there are hints in the literature that Mongolian women were similar to that. So again, this might be more of an Eastern concept that he pulled in.
Yeah.
So and especially Chaldeans were very similar to the Huns and the Mongols, especially in their description and in their
and that's gonna unfold a lot more as we go here. I do think that is one of the, I'm not going to get into it until we get to spoiler territory, but we don't really find out kind of the details of the Saldean personality until books 6 and 7. It's a long time before that really unfolds, which I think is one of the reasons so many people complained about Faile in the forums as the series was going on, because it took so long for all the pieces to come together.
Well, we can get to our talk on daddies and daughters too, because she's forming love for Perrin. She already has that initial Twitter pated love.
Yeah.
But she's trying to build a long-term love for him, and her example is her daddy.
Yep.
And so it's, as we see later, those are big shoes to fill.
That's something we don't need to go into detail, but just if this is your first time reading through, keep an eye out, because in this book she starts mentioning her father. She starts using him as an example of things that he's done, things that he says, and using him to either justify her actions or often give advice to Perrin, channeling her father. And so,
and she's also got the influence of her mother too. So
yep.
let's contrast her with Nynaeve real quick. Nynaeve had a positive father figure, not really a mother figure, right? So she needed to find an already strong man because of her positive father figure. Whereas Faile has the positive father figure, but also a strong mother figure that taught her how to develop a strong man. And so that's where we see the big difference here between
Whereas Nynaeve needs the manliest man in the whole series because she needs someone who can contend with her and out masculine her because she's so masculine as a woman.
well, and contend with her respect for her father. So there, she has to already respect the man. She doesn't know how to develop a man she respects. Where Perrin is very young. Perrin's young, and he's already physically what Faile wants. He's mentally in a lot of ways, but he's not the character she needs at this point. So she needs to help him develop into the man she wants.
Right. Well, and I think that I don't think that ties directly into one of the main complaints about Faile is, and you know, off on a little bit of a real life detour here, but that's kind of what we do, is if a partner of any sort, but especially romantic, wants to change you fundamentally, that's a toxic relationship. Now, there can be changes about you and about your personality, about your actions that either aren't bad or could be very good, could be very beneficial. And that's part of being complementary. But if somebody wants to change a fundamental part of your being, then that person doesn't really love you.
No, I think the easy way to put it is they shouldn't be trying to change you. They should be trying to help you be better at the things you are you.
Yes. Whether that's enhancing your positives or tweaking your negatives. But it shouldn't be a fundamental change. That's, you know, I mean, just bluntly, that person doesn't love you. They love the idea of what you could or should be.
Well, here's a good example. Say you're a man and you're a workaholic, and you meet a girl and you really like her and you want to start a family with her and everything. She doesn't make you work less. She helps you balance work, personal life, relationships. So that's the big difference. It's not, oh, you should work less. It's, hey, this is how you can balance these two things. So it's encouraging you. So the person who works a lot, obviously work ethic is one of their strong points, and it is a sign of a good, strong member of society. We'll use that terminology, but at the same time, it can get in the way of home life. So it's the difference between someone saying you need to work less, take away that thing that you're good at, that self-discipline or whatever you want to attribute it to, or here's how you balance it. So now you can work a lot, you can work hard, you can be successful, but you can still spend time with your family. You can still do this. So that's the difference here.
And when you see this example in the series as it goes on, I think the key example, and again, RJ did so little by accident. I don't think it's an accident that before we meet Faile and see how she starts to interact with and change Perrin, we see Lanfear trying to tempt him. So keep in mind the way she does it versus what Faile does, which is much more of encouragement, of you can do, not just you need to do this, you should do this, but you can do this. That you are denying a central part of your being, of your ability, by not stepping up into this hero role, versus what Lanfear is doing, which is pushing and cajoling of glory and fame. Grab hold of this because you're nothing if you don't have this.
And in Perrin's case, you start to see a lot of it. I think his biggest hang up with so many things that going forward in doing what he needs to do is he's very introverted. And he doesn't want to be the center of attention. He doesn't want to be the life of the party like Matt does. He doesn't want to be that person. And she kind of nudges him in this is when you need to be. You don't have to do it all the time, but these are the times you need to do it. in order to be a success at what you do. So it's taking what is his weakness and just helping him with his weakness versus changing him as a person. Okay, so we need to get into the book. Yeah,
right, we've moving back to the book.
I said we should probably add some of this same talk into the spoiler section. So I'm taking notes as we go.
So back to the book. First couple of pages of this chapter, which starts on 259 in the paperback, Leave Takings, chapter 16. So as I mentioned, Faile came up with this scheme to get Loyal to give her an Ogier oath, which is as binding as a signed contract in blood in triplicate. It is a saying in this world that if you give someone an Ogier oath, that you have bound yourself completely to that word. They do not break their oaths. So we get a little bit of her scheming here of how she's going to make sure that Perrin doesn't leave her behind. But kind of cool and kind of annoying is we don't see Ogier get physical for a very long time. But here in the fourth book, we get a hint at it. So
we saw it in book 2.
We saw it once in book 2 when that Trolloc ambushed them while they were in the foregate, and Loyal threw the Trolloc so hard against a wall he broke its neck. And he was shocked and a little embarrassed by that. And yet we get a hint here that he was in full battle mode while the Trollocs and Fades were attacking the stone. And he barricaded up a bunch of women and children and stood in front of the door to make sure that they were not they didn't get gat, because that would be very, very gross and unsettling. So we know that Loyal certainly has the potential for heroism, and there is an inner warrior in him, but it's buried even deeper than what Perrin's was before Perrin's was forced out of him. I like that even in the face of, because this is from Perrin's perspective, so we get some of his internal monologue here with his frustration with what Faile is doing. But he's as stiff-necked as she is, just in a different way. That's part of how they're complementary, is they're both incredibly stubborn, which is often a negative trait, but can be a positive trait, depending on how you're using it. And on page 265, towards the end of this section here, he decides, you know what? I'm not going to play your game. Fine. If Loyal said that he'd show you before anyone else, then I won't be with you. I'll just follow along at enough of a distance where I can't be considered part of your group. And I'd like to leave today, Perrin said, not looking at Faile. Best to go quickly, Loyal agreed with a regretful look at the book on the table. I can tidy my notes on the journey, I suppose. The light knows what I will miss being away from Rand. Did you hear me? Perrin Faile demanded. I will get my horse and a few supplies, Loyal. We can be on our way by mid-morning. Burn you, Perrin Ivira. Answer me. So I like the interjection of her yelling there and Perrin just ignoring her, and Loyal, of course, being stuck in the middle, as he often is in these things.
As he's aptly named. Yes. Yeah.
And then we're gonna can't jump back to the ladies yet.
No, because
because he
we get
bumps into Gaul.
yeah, yeah, we get
So that is important. And it's a small it is a small thing when it happened, but it was Perrin doing the right thing because it was the right thing, even if most people would have thought, yeah, I he should be let out, but I'm not going to do it because that could be awkward. But Perrin just does it because it's the right thing to do. And we talked a little bit about it when it happened. And now it's having ramifications. It's paying off. And so Gaul is going to go with him.
when I like the last little interaction when he hears that they're going through the ways, and he blinked. That was the indication that something was wrong. And his answer, this is what made him blink. He says, "Death comes to us all." So he's expecting to die, and that made him blink.
Yep.
Well,
as we already had in earlier in the book of it was Perrin talking to Ruark of what happens if Rand doesn't do what he needs to do to show you that he's he who comes with the dawn. And the implication was the Aiel are going to leave, and then the Terrans are immediately going to turn on Rand. And Ruark's response is sleep well and wake. That's how they wish you a good night, is wish, hopefully you wake up from your sleep.
Well, let me rant up the show for just a second here, because Gaul is so expressionless that when he thinks he's going to die, he just blinks. And Gaul is 10 times more showing of expression than Lan. And what did we get in the show?
Tarzan impression or something. I don't know what was going on there.
So this is the disconnect we have from Hollywood and the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we're back to the ladies.
Yes. And ladies being ladies. She didn't want Rand to stop her from leaving because she needs to leave. But now she's mad that he didn't try and stop her from leaving.
Oh, well, this is these. See, Gawain is a little different, and this might be part of the development process. But Elayne and Nynaeve had basically one parent situations, because Elayne really didn't have a dad other than the influence of Gareth Bryan. Mm-hmm. And Nynaeve didn't have a mother. So they're kind of ignorant about these interactions to some degree. And Egwene actually had a good example on both with her mother and father. So she's a little bit more level-headed, but she's also a child at this point still. She's what, 16 or 17 at this point. So she shows flashes of that immaturity, but she's a little more level-headed, where Elayne is, what the heck am I supposed to do in this situation?
Not only did she not have a father. Her biological father died when she was very young. She doesn't remember him at all. Gareth Bryan was a father figure, but as we'll find out later, and not surprisingly, he was more of a father figure to her brothers, because he was teaching them tactics and strategy and sword fighting and all of the things that a prince would need to know. She was not only did she not have a father figure, but her mother was a queenly queen. So it was thought that she was romantic with Gareth Bryan, but it was never displayed in public because she was a queen first. So not only did she not have a father figure, but her mother was more of a teacher than a guide into womanhood. Her concern wasn't as much of her girl becoming a young woman as her girl becoming a queen.
And the only real romantic interactions she's ever had is probably from storybooks and Lenny's little quips. So,
Yes, which will come up later. I think we've started to get a few of them when we first meet her in the tower, and that they come up more and more. And that's a good point, that you do see that when it comes to her as a normal person, it was really Lenny who raised her. And we'll see more and more of her as the would-be monarch, the would-be leader, and we do see that influence from Morgase as we go. But now we get, I hadn't thought of this before, but as you point that out, we're about to get, yeah. So yeah, Elayne and Egwene are being kind of girly here because, and it's not disparaging. It's just the simple fact of, well, and Rand is kind of being a little dumb too, because he doesn't have experience. None of these youngsters have experience. They're just trying to stumble and feel their way through here. And now Elayne is going to get an example of male-female romantic interactions, but it's not necessarily one she should take as an example for herself. Because as we've discussed, Nynaeve and Lan are very different people from most of the other characters in the book, and so their relationship is very different. It's one of the things that makes it so enjoyable to read when it kind of comes to a head later on. But we are going to get it kind of coming to a head here as Lan comes storming in one of the funnest little scenes to read in the whole series, in my mind.
And again, to rant on the show, you cannot have this scene now. This moment's already passed.
It will not have anything nearing the impact of what it has here, because one, we've already seen Lan lose his cool, which he does here for the first time ever. Like, him losing his cool was his face twitching in the Great Hunt when he and Moiraine were with the older sisters. Is like his face twitching and him, looking uncomfortable and making a snide comment. That was him losing control. Okay. That was the extent of it. Now he's actually quivering with emotion, like literally quivering with emotion and having trouble speaking. You can't have that anymore. And they've already consummated the relationship in the show. So do you have the same impact of we have this sexual and romantic tension between us, but neither one of us can admit it. And now you're not only separating from me, you're going somewhere potentially deadly. It no longer will I just not see you for a long time, maybe never, but doubly never now, because we're both going somewhere dangerous.
Well, and this could be a crossover topic too. Maybe we need to do a whole witchcraft session on the different kinds of love and the things that the chemical processes and the neurological processes that go along with it, because we just talked about Gaul blinking, thinking he was going to die. And Lan is more stony than Gaul. And Lan is losing control over Nynaeve.
Yeah.
And it's no mystery. And Robert Jordan knew this as someone who had a seemingly healthy relationship with his spouse and was no stranger to war. And he's actually talked about killing people and collateral damage and finding out that you killed people that you didn't intend to kill. And so he's no stranger to all these things. And so much of death revolves around love. And to the extent that someone's not afraid of death and they will die for someone they love. And so the emotion of love is actually stronger than the fear of death.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. It sounds cheesy, but it's really cool how it works.
Yeah, well, it's why the title and the term Band of Brothers is so impactful and carries on beyond
because
just the
you
one
develop that
show.
brotherly love
Mhm.
for your compatriots, I guess. But look at how many wars have been started because a monarch loved someone, even if it was that stupid first initial love at first sight, brain hormones going off, and you get stupid love. So it's amazing how it works, and it's very adaptive because say you're the fourth beta male in a primate group, right? And you develop an attraction to the some of the females in the group, you have to get stupid to challenge the first alpha. You have to get stupid to do it because you're both going to lose in that fight because you're both strong. The fourth beta versus the first alpha, you're both going to be damaged from that fight, and you may end up with your balls chewed off, which is kind of how that works sometimes. So it's definitely an emotion that has to actually make you stupid to be successful.
So stupid that, and this is why this is such a great interaction for them, and potentially a bad interaction for Elayne to watch and kind of mimic, kind of like that one guy who's kind of the wallflower in the group who sees the others making jokes and then he tries to do it, but he doesn't really know how, and so he takes it too far. I think that's kind of what Elayne does here when she writes this second letter to Rand, but it's very telling that Lan is so unhinged. He doesn't quite say outright, but he hints he's kind of going there before Nynaeve cuts him off, that he might leave Moiraine to go with Nynaeve despite his bond. And she has to be the level-headed one. And this is why they're so complementary, but also it shows the kind of person Nynaeve is looking for is she will not accept Lan, that the girls, and I use that term purposefully, the girls are like, he would have gone with you. Why didn't you accept his help? He would have gone with you. You could have had him. No, I'm not going to have him if that means a part of him is always gone.
This might be the meme for this episode.
I've got another one for you that I'll see if I can find, but I don't know. I think I may have sent it to you before. I'll see if I can find it. Anyway,
well, send it to me again. We might put it up, but if you don't give me a better one, that might be the meme for this episode.
But this is, and I hadn't really thought about it in these terms, but we've been talking about this and using Nynaeve is that example of a strong female and a masculine female, and what that means. It doesn't mean bitchy. It means strong. There's difference. And here she is being strong. She's putting her foot down. She's doing it in her own way. She's telling Lan, no, you're going to follow your oath. You're going to follow your bond. And if you're not going to listen to me, here's a letter signed and sealed by the Amarillan that says, do what I say. And here we have a throwback to the foreshadowing of I could make a warder dance with this, because she is metaphorically. I think in that foreshadowing she meant it literally as kind of a bit of hyperbole, but now she's actually doing it. She's making him dance metaphorically, but it's what they both need. She needs to go do this on her own, and she needs to have him when she can fully have him, and he needs to have her when he can fully give himself to her, because that's another part of this. Another part of Nynaeve putting her foot down is she knows Lan is the one being emotional and unhinged here, and she knows that he will always regret this if he abandons his bond to Moiraine and follows her. That it will tear out a piece of him, that he cannot be his full and whole self if he does this, because duty is so freaking important to him.
Well, and here you also get something that we missed in the show, or they did very clumsily. Even in his anger, his white hot anger, he's the warrior poet. You know, he speaks of the place in his heart where nothing could grow, and she's cultivated flowers. And
yes,
this is the part we didn't get because you didn't set it up.
Yes, this scene starting on 270, where Lan moves so quickly toward Nynaeve that Elayne very nearly wrapped him in flows of air before she could think, and smooches her thoroughly, and she tries to maintain the firmness that she's been going at this with, but she's also caught up in the moment. She's not, she's not a piece of stone. She has the same emotions. She's just, her perspective is letting her keep her head here where Lan isn't. But she does lose it a little bit here in this romantic embrace, because these feelings are definitely reciprocated. And then, not the whole world, he replied, but if they can see, they can hear as well. You have made a place in my heart where I thought there was no room for anything else, blah, blah, etc., as you said. So, and then he ends it, there's the warrior poet there, and then he ends it with the, he made an elegant bow. For a moment, Elayne thought he actually meant to kneel and kiss Nynaeve's great serpent ring. As you command, he murmured, so do I obey. And it's right up there with Perrin and the forge that I talked about in the last book. That is such a great scene in The Dragon Reborn, and it's not as extreme as what Lan stuff is here with what they did in the series, but you lose a lot of that with Perrin being the big dumb oaf that he is, rather than the deliberate thinker who's just out of his element. And now he comes back to this thing, and it helps him center and focus. And
I have to go back to
see what he
Nynaeve
needs
for a
to
second.
do. Okay.
Because I have to eat some of my words from earlier in this talk. Remember when I said she didn't know how to develop a man into what she wanted? She shows that she actually knows some of that here, because she makes a statement about, Gwen says he was ready to go with you and everything. She says, she says, not like that. This is not the way I want it. It has to be. And this is where some maturity does come through, because when we talk about changing somebody against their nature versus enhancing their nature, if she had done that, she would have changed them against their nature, and that in a relationship causes resentment.
But it's not, there's still a little bit of that problematic psychology there with Nynaeve, because it's not all that. There's also still part of it is her animosity towards Moiraine.
But at the same time, she's still making the right decision, because if she made him break his oaths, he would have had that resentment at some level throughout the whole, just like, quit your job and move over here when you had a great job, and then things are going rough, you start thinking about that great job you had way back when, right? So,
but there's still a part of her that is, I'll be damned if I'm going to share him with Moiraine.
Because no, it's the fact that she has that feeling, but she still did the right thing. That's the difference. And so that tells you, kind of someone's intentions. Whereas if she was just some crazy bitch, she would have been like, well, yeah, come with me. I'm going to take you. You're mine.
So,
Okay. So back onto where you were going. I just had to pull this back for just a second because I did have to eat a little crow there because she showed insight into what I said she wasn't good at. And I'd forgotten about it.
well, that was the last I had on that chapter. And then we're on to chapter 17, Deceptions, which is going to bounce around a little bit.
Because we start with Thom.
And it is a very aptly named chapter with what is going on here. So it starts with we know exactly what Thom is doing here because we're seeing it from his perspective. He's playing the game of houses and he's playing it for Rand at a lower level. He's going to keep himself hidden. He's just a simple gleeman, as he often says. So he's going to insert rumor and ideas in the heads of the servants that will eventually get around and get spread around to help Rand have a base of support. So he's entertaining those who are trying to clean up the mess, but he's doing so with idle talk that isn't so idle. But then he comes back to his room to find, speaking of, Moiraine. So now we see two masters at the game sparring with each other. But Moiraine gets the upper hand because one, she's more ruthless than Thom is. and two, she has more personal information and is able to give both the carrot and the stick to get Thom to do what she wants. We also get a little hint of something here that if you read the graphic novel or the short novel New Spring, you'll get a little more of it. But she talks about how they gentled his nephew on the spot, and that's against Tower law, and they weren't supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so she doesn't have a problem giving those names to Thom, knowing that at best something is unpleasant is going to happen to those Red sisters. At worst, he could possibly kill them, because I have to think that Moiraine at least suspects, if not knows, that Thom killed the king. I mean, if he can kill a freaking king, he can kill an Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm.
With her information network and her powers of
she's
deduction.
really throwing out there that she knows that he's responsible for the High Lord's death too. He's like, how could she know?
Yeah.
She couldn't know. He's trying to convince himself that she couldn't know, but this is like normal stuff in Karheim. This
an interesting day yesterday, she said as he sat down. I had not called Trollocs and Halfmen interesting, he said dryly. I did not mean them. Earlier, the High Lord Carleon dead in a hunting accident. His good friend Tadosian apparently mistook him for a boar, or perhaps a deer.
and we already know that he wrote the note that he's thinking of in his head, because that's what he hid when Matt came in.
Yes. So I love that we see that little blurb there with just him forging that note. And now we see these incredible ramifications that came about from it, as Moiraine explains things.
Well, and we also get a hint into Thom, because it takes some kind of person to know that someone's going to die from your actions. Mm-hmm. Yes, this person was a bad person, but you're doing something in bad faith that causes this person to die.
Yeah.
At the same time. So there's a little bit of kind of a Machiavellian.
There's a coldness there, a hardness there that is in contrast to his jovial exterior.
Mm-hmm. Which in one of our regular episodes, we're going to dive into this book. which there's a whole chapter on the rules of means to ends. And we cover this part of it. Do the means justify the ends? Or the ends justify the means? I mean, I should the other way around. And what are the rules around that? And we kind of see where Thom can kind of fit himself in there. The ends is these two factions against Rand are no longer a problem. But I just had someone basically executed because with a lie is the long and short of it. So again, something very Machiavellian about that.
I think we get it from her perspective later at some point, but we get a hint here that Moiraine feels a little bit bad for what she's doing to Thom here at the end on page 279 down at the bottom, where he starts to get emotional and lose control. Will you leave me, please? I will teach you that not all Aes Sedai are like those Reds, Thom. You must learn that. Please. He stood leaning on the table until she was gone, unwilling to let her see him sink awkwardly to his knees, see the tears trickling down his weathered face. So this is something that is still after 20 years, a really raw nerve for Thom, and something that makes him very emotional. So he'd kind of hinted that his nephew, because he was a bachelor, his nephew was like a son to him. He was very close. And so we get that fully here, but we also get a little bit of humanness from Moiraine, but she's not able to shed her own Machiavellian nature here. So how could you think that you could temper what you just did to Thom, and make him see that, he doesn't have to hate all Aes Sedai, but you just crushed the poor guy. But we do see there's a part of Moiraine that at least wants to be more human. And I think that just adds to how driven she is.
Is this a slight play, by the way? Sorry to just throw this tangent in here. Uncle Thom to nephew Owen, but we had Uncle Owen in Star Wars.
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, this would have been written right after that. So
yeah.
Sorry to just derail everything, but that thought just came to me.
That was a short segment, so we don't need to spend too much time on that. Because then we're going to go into a lengthy section back to the White Tower.
Okay, and let's pause for a second for a bathroom break. How much do you want to get through right now? Because we talked about separating everything, so we probably got to get through everybody just going their own way, and then do the spoilers.
Yeah, let's finish up this section and this chapter and see how much time we have.
Okay, cool.
All right, so I don't think it'll take much to get through the end of this, because I don't know how much we want to talk about in non-spoiler section here. Except that,
well, let's just do the nuts and bolts. Let's get where everybody's going. And
well, the nuts and bolts of this here is that we jump back to Min, who we last saw arriving in the tower, and Sawan's going to use her to view things, but they have to come up with a disguise for her so they don't connect her with Moiraine. Gawain sees through it, but Galad is so simple and direct. He's almost simplistic. He's not, but he has such a rigid worldview that things are what they are. And so he can't see through what's going on here between Gawain and Min. So Galad
is almost like a physical version of an autistic person, Asperger's person, where he doesn't relate to the person he's talking to from an emotional standpoint very well.
Yeah.
But he's a super genius with what he does.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a shame that it's so long before we get a Gaulid point of view.
Yeah, this is true.
Because we do get some Gawain points of view here in a couple of books.
And yeah, and he goes in that short in that jump, he goes from somebody that you kind of find a little bit of annoying and almost like a caricature character into somebody that in my view you actually start really liking, and you see the inner demons that are working.
Yes.
In someone who's supposedly so pure. And
I'll try not to get off on too much of a tangent. It's why the end of Game of Thrones was so unfreaking annoying. Because the best character for like the first 4 or 5 seasons was Jaime Lannister.
Yes. Okay.
Because here you have,
I'm a Tyrion fan, but I guess
but as an arc, right? So this is kind of my same contention that Egwene has the best arc overall, is that the highs are much higher for Tyrion. He's so much more fun as a character, but Jaime starts off banging his sister and killing a child.
Crippling a child.
In his mind, he thought he was killing him.
Yeah, yeah.
So
attempting to kill a child.
And in his mind, he was committing murder and he didn't have a problem with it. You end up feeling sorry for, and then sympathy for, and then actually liking him. You shouldn't do that with someone like this, but he goes through such an incredible transformation. And Gallaad is like that it is something of a shame that we don't see it for so long. Although I say so long, I mean, the freaking series is 13 books long. And we get his first point of view like halfway through. So I guess we do get him at least for almost half the series. But here you're right. At the beginning of the series, when most of what we know from him is from other people's perspective, especially Elayne, he is like a caricature. And we see that here with how he interacts with men. And how he responds to Gawain's kind of teasing. But then we also see Min here. She's on Rand's side. She's going to try and do what she can do, but there's just only so much she can do as she tries to kind of nudge Gawain and Gallaad in kind of that direction of, maybe he is the real dragon and maybe he's not a bad guy.
Which is cool because I think I've said it before. I've developed a new respect for Nynaeve with our talks on this, but Min is still my favorite female character in all the books. And what she does here is so she's doing the best with what she has.
Yes. And
she is trying to play a character she's not, and actually doing a good job of it. But like you said, Gawain saw right through it because he's an observant young man. But she's way outside of her comfort zone, trying to do the right thing at this point. And then she comes into her own later, which to me is like the most developed of the you talk about threes, the 3 with Rand. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I liked her from the beginning, is because, like you just said with Tyrion, he had a lot of highs all along the way, and almost every single moment with Min is kind of a high.
Yeah. And so we get this high that escalates as she goes to Sawan because she sees some bad juju happening in the tower, but also because she's sick of this. She wants to go to the man she loves, who is also literally the most important man in the world right now. Not just the most important man in the world to you because you're romantically entangled with him, but the most important person to everyone. And she wants to go there, but Sawan knows better. And so she's going to keep her around. even though she refuses to understand how men's visions work. Because she keeps thinking she can change them.
Yeah, and so that actually brings me to a topic I want to talk about in the spoilers. So I just wrote that down.
But then we end with some foreboding here as someone who we do not know, but is referred to as Aes Sedai, shows up at this farm where this girl Sarah Covenry is doing a penance, and she's tortured, and then it's pretty clear that everybody there is killed, because it ends with there was silence, dead silence on the farm. So whoever this was is someone asking after Min and her connection with Sawan, and has no problem using the power to kill people. So we know something bad is happening there.
Yeah, and I don't know if this one gets addressed, but there's two possibilities.
Yes.
And we're getting the way she does the killing leads you one direction, but who we know it ends up in the tower leads you in another. So we'll talk about that in spoilers, I guess.
Yeah.
Then we get back to Perrin.
And for anyone who has forgotten, because there's a lot of characters, Sarah was she was either a novice or an apprentice. I think novice. Yeah, novice, who took Min to see the Amarillo when she first arrived. And because she saw Min and Gawain there together and could potentially tell someone that Demandred was Min, that she was sent off to this farm as penance just to get her out of the way. But somebody noticed.
Well, I guess there's three people it could be. Again, we'll talk about that in the spoiler section.
All right. So do you want to keep going here, or do you want to?
No, because I think we can start looking at what happens. We're starting with Perrin. We can do the whole Perrin arc as one thing. And then, or do we want to, what order do we want to go to? Let's let Scott decide, since he's the only one that comments. Anybody else can comment. But
yeah, that's a good point. We should actually go into spoilers here. And
yeah, so going forward, we're going to go into the three separate stories. The Perrin has his section, Rand and Matt have their section, and the girls have their section. And so which one do you want us to do first? You just let us know in the comments. And if you're still the only one that comments, Scott, you'll win. So but right. Anybody else, if you want to control the conversation to some degree, put your vote in the comments as well, and it's not going to be hard to count the ballots. So we did pick up another subscriber. We're back to 49. Ooh. Yeah, let's get to 50, everyone. But then yeah, we're going to go into spoilers now. So
all right, so if you're reading for the first time, there were a number who watched our series reviews for the Prime series and said they were going to read it after watching. So that's why we started this. So if you're one of those people, go away. But thank you for listening in for the time being.
And I'll be more polite because my mom is one of those first-time readers. Please disregard the rest of this episode and come back to it later because she just got through the Great Hunt. So.
And we'll give it a little time for if anyone's kind of reading along in real time, but just keep reading through the Shadow Rising, because we're gonna start going out of order here.
Okay, so spoilers. I got on my list more on the Faile romance. I put Elayne as the monarch because I think that's a topic we could go into. Got Matt and Galad and Demandred, if you want to go there.
Demandred.
Yeah, we were talking about Galad, and there's something in the last book. You're about there again. With Demandred, that Matt and Galad or Lan is kind of the topic there, and then Min's kind of mindfuck is how I wrote that. Which one do you want to go into first?
What do you mean by Min?
Okay, so we'll do Min first then. Okay, we just ended with Min. We'll start with Min. So because so she knows all her viewings are 100%. If she understands it, she knows it's 100%.
If
And
she
we
knows,
also
she knows.
we also know she knows she's going to fall in love with Rand. So when we do our rider on the elephant part of the mind, the rider being the conscious part and the elephant being your emotional side, what's her cycle when it comes to that? She sees somebody, you're going to fall in love with this guy. How do you process this? Because do you fight that, or do you find every excuse for it to happen? That's where Min's at right now. Does she really want to go to Rand, or is she just convinced that I have to because I saw this part of the pattern?
It's hard to tell how much is that and how much is just her personality, but I mean, she says that she tried to, and that's kind of what she says at the end of the Great Hunt when she drags him into the bed, when she finds him wounded, is that I tried to fight it. But when we first see her, she seems kind of one of those people that is just kind of naturally flirty with the way she interacts with Rand, who's the only one we really see interacting with her, because it's his perspective through that first part of Eye of the World. So was she just being naturally flirty, or was she actually being flirty because, hey, here's a good looking guy? But also I just had a viewing of him and I'm going to end up falling in love with him. Oh, but there's more, which I'm going to have to share him. So I really don't want, besides the fact that I don't want to be told I'm going to fall in love with this guy, I don't want to have to share a guy. So I really don't want this to happen. But by the end of the Great Hunt, she says, I tried to fight it and I can't.
Do you think she's going through like the 7 stages of grief, where it's like, fight it, then acceptance, then, all of these different stages. I just had another thought. Let's get a little Freudian here. This is definitely spoiler territory. Rand's 3 girls, so we're just going to name them out there: Elayne, Aviendha, and Min. Min is a Mat,
and we've already kind of seen that. Aviendha kind of comes out of nowhere, but we've already set up Min and Elayne, and we've already dropped off Egwene.
Yeah, Min is Mat, Aviendha is Perrin, and Elayne is Rand. If you really look at their development.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So the tryst becomes the tryst. The 3 brothers in arms become his.
They are kind of the
manifestations of.
They are kind of the feminine avatars of the male counterparts.
Which would explain why I like Min the most. But yeah, really, realistically, Aviendha is the most conscientious and nuts and bolts of them all.
Yeah.
Elayne is the leader, and Min is the philosophical, almost the pattern seeing, which she sees the pattern in this, but I mean in a colloquial sense, pattern seeing person, where she notices, she reads people, she reads things, and obviously she reads the actual pattern itself. So yeah, Min is Mat, Aviendha's Perrin, and Elayne is Rand. That's kind of creepy, but okay. What's the next one? Do we want to talk more about the Faile romance? Because we tried to stay away from who.
I don't think there's any more to add to it, and there's going to be a ton of it as we go through Perrin's story.
Okay.
Because that really does develop pretty fast. Well, I would say it developed fast, but it gets a lot of attention in this book because that is a major storyline through this book. It is I feel like Perrin's story and Rand's story are, kind of 1A, 1B, and then there's a secondary story with the ladies, because that doesn't feel like it gets as much page time, not quite as much at least as Perrin's and then Rand and Mat. So there's a lot of page time for Perrin in this book.
What about Elayne? Because I thought it was a little bit disappointing the way she kind of came into her adulthood. And I almost think it was wrong to make her the one that gets pregnant. Though it makes the most sense from what we just talked about with
Yeah, it does
her
kind of make the
being
most
the
sense.
Rand, because then they have the child together.
And her being the least worldly of the three,
Mm-hmm.
her being the most girly in that regard. But we did kind of gloss over when her relationship with Rand starts, there is kind of a summary of how she's not just canoodling in the corner, but whispering in his ear to give him guidance. So that is kind of an interesting contrast that we see, because we see that Nynaeve Lan scene from her perspective, which I think is great, because not only do we get this great scene with Nynaeve and Lan that progresses their relationship and them individually as characters, but then we learn so much about Elayne as a normal person, as opposed to the princess, the heir apparent of one of, if not the strongest kingdom in the realm. So we learn a lot about her because she's the one seeing this, and so she's thinking about these things, and we see how immature she is, just plainly immature and ignorant, because she didn't have all this time to develop her personal emotional development. So much of her time was spent on her mental development from her mother, which we see in that little summary scene of what Rand was doing in the interim before the Trolloc attack and before he went into the doorways, of that week or so of her giving him advice and all the things, and how proud she was when he would follow it, how excited she was that he wanted to give her credit, but then she told him. Actually, there's an interesting kind of parallel with her not wanting him to try and stop her, but then being mad when he didn't try and stop her, is because we do see a similar thing there with that, of he wants to give her credit and she says no. She's pleased that he wanted to, but the intellectually, the mental development of her, she mentally developed beyond her years, says you have to be the leader, which means people have to think you know more than you do.
I think you eased my mind on that one, so we can move on. Mat, Gallad, and Lan versus Demandred. This is where I think Sanderson went rogue. I know we won't know unless we have the notes released, but when we look at the way Demandred entered the scene and how he went down, the two most obvious adversaries to take Demandred down were Mat being the most obvious, and Gallad, which I think Gallad does fight him.
Yes.
And is defeated, because Gallad is supposed to be the best swordsman, not Lan. Lan is supposed to be one of the best, but Gallad is the best swordsman, and Demandred insisted on fighting with just the sword at the end. So you've got Mat, who is the antithesis to Demandred when it comes to the battlefield. So, and he defeated Gallad with a quarterstaff, which now he has the Ashendara. So that would be one obvious thing, and it could have been the final badass Mat moment. Or we've played up Gallad being the best swordsman, purity of the light. What better pure moment than to take out one of the Forsaken? And even using Gallad, you could have had them both die, and that would have been an awesome scene. But then I think Sanderson wanted a badass Lan moment. He played to the crowd. He's like,
I just read that yesterday. And it, because of the way that scene, those scenes with Demandred plays out, it feels anticlimactic because it's the third time that someone's come at him like this. right? So he kills Gawain. He almost kills Galad. He maims Galad, and then Lan shows up, and it feels kind of anticlimactic at this point. Yeah, it's kind of a cool scene, and it's interesting the way you phrase it, because from his perspective, and I hadn't thought about this before, but so when we do finally get a Galad perspective, it's when he becomes the Lord Captain by challenging Valda in single combat. And from his perspective, he's supposed to be this great swordsman, and yet from his perspective, he's thinking that Valda is better. But it's similar to how it unfolds with Lan and Demandred, that Valda is better in pure physical skill, but then ultimately Galad is the better swordsman because he outthinks Valda. Same with Lan. Not only is Lan thinking, because it's from his perspective, that scene is from his perspective, and Lan is thinking that one, Demandred is the better pure physical swordsman, and two, he's fresh, and Lan has been fighting nonstop for a couple of weeks now, and he's tired, but he's able to outthink him. So he's able to do what Galad did, only better.
Yeah.
I will say that upon rereading, so this is like I think this is the third time I've read the last three books. So this is the third time I've read Memory of Light. And the thought I had was, one, because this is the third sword fight here, it's kind of anticlimactic. And it diminishes a little bit the cool scene for Lan. And the other thought I had is that Lan is already so cool. He already does so much in these last couple of books here, that's the other reason it felt a little anticlimactic to me, because he has essentially finally reclaimed his place as a king, as the king of Malkir, and he's leading the entire Borderlander army looks to him. With the way Demandred rants and raves at the end there, it kind of occurred to me that who I think should have killed him. You know where I'm going with this?
No.
Tam.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
Because remember, so first of all, because I feel like we don't get nearly as much Tam as we should during the series. But then also,
oh, you know what would have even been better? Tam and Abel fighting side by side.
That would have been better, because you know what, that would have made a lot of sense, because you have set Demandred up as this incredibly powerful both channeler and general and swordsman. Like he is one of, if not the best across two ages of all three of those things. So actually, and in this book, we set up that both Abel and Tam are sneaky little bastards, that they are very good at sneaking around. So why couldn't they have snuck around and managed to sneak past the battle lines and get to Demandred? And you're ranting and raving, you want Rand. Well, I'm his father, and I'm the father of the general who's whooping your butt right now. So come at us, bro. That would have been awesome.
Well, but and even with Abel, you would have you could have played on and had a foreshadowing moment of Matt beating Galad and Gawain and Abel beating Demandred in the exact same way.
Yeah.
The overconfident swordsman, which would have played to the legend that Hammer tells right after Matt beats Galad and Gawain.
Oh, that's a good point there. So yeah. I wasn't thinking about that. That is a great tie-in to
so
go.
I thought Matt made the most sense, but what would have been the funnest would Abel.
But also because remember, right before Rand goes off to face the Dark One, Tam helps him kind of center himself by letting go of all that he's lost when they have that sparring session. And Tam even ties up his hand so he can only use one hand as well, and is besting him, but he's coaching him as he does it. And so you get that, you really see this. It's one of the reasons that I usually give the edge to the Shadow Rising over the Dragon Reborn. And it's not just because Perrin's story is so good and Rand's and Matt's story is really good, but then you also get that great Tam and Abel scenes there with Perrin. And I feel like they get lost, and a lot of the smaller characters that come along later should have been those two. Could have been those two.
Okay, Rafe as the showrunner. You've already made changes that ruined everything. So let's make changes, and we'll call it alternate endings. Alternate endings to the book, since Jordan didn't actually write everything except that very last scene that you talked about that he did write. And so you can write, and we'll do the alternate endings around Demandred's demise. So either the White Cloaks confront the Shara and Galad wins, Matt does it, or Tam and Abel does it, or even Tam goes to center Rand and Abel beats Demandred as a farmer with a quarterstaff. And there you go. There's your changes that actually the fans might actually find kind of fun, since you already fucked everything up. There's nowhere but up to go. So if anybody knows the showrunner, send it his way.
Yeah. Did you have any other notes for spoiler talk, or should I get into
I wanted to
rant that I was
bring
talking about earlier?
Is it going to fit in with the?
No, it's what I texted you earlier about how ranting about the show.
Okay, so one of the comments was not seeing anything about the destroying of the notes for the Outriggers, and I kind of read it a little bit wrong. It says he stated he would run over his hard drive before allowing anyone else to share. So whether it was actually run over or not, but then Sanderson in another spot, and I'll have to look for it, did say that he only has seen the two sentences we talked about. So Harriet probably knows, but Sanderson, unless he's lying, says that he only saw those sentences we talked about with Matt in the gutter and Perrin going to kill an old friend. So where we want to go from there, let me bring that back up and you can see what I talked about by looking at the URL. So go to theoryland.com and
Theoryland. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff on there.
Yeah, so you can go there and see what we're talking about. But Scott did say he didn't see anything about him destroying it, and I was wrong. He didn't, at least as we know, destroy it. But
he just didn't want anyone to see.
Yeah, he didn't want anybody to do it. Now I did see, as I was searching through there again, that they're not ruling it out, and I'm like, oh, he didn't want anybody to do it. You got to rule it out. You can't just keep cashing in on this. If you do it now, it's selling out. It really is, because you got to honor a dying man's wish, man.
You know, if you want to do that, the best way I think to do it and still kind of honor his wish is to not do it as a book, but to do it as a video game. Because then you can use the notes without actually having to write a full book, because notes will fit into a video game setting and video game dialogue a lot easier than, like, you know, having another author come in and
to
turn
me
those
that's still
notes
sharecropping,
into literature.
To me that's still sharecropping.
Yeah. So it would entirely depend on what he wanted. And I could
you can say the same thing about the show. You could say, well, just put it as make it as a alternate show or a spin-off of the original. No, so you wanted to talk about the show, and you hope it. What'd you say? You hope it bombs. So
I hope it bombs so bad that Prime loses the rights and Netflix gets it. And here's why. Two reasons. First of all, because Netflix has had its issues for sure. And it looks like it is following the business model of go woke, go broke, because they've been losing so many shares. But what's interesting to me about Netflix versus Prime is that when Prime kind of goes woke, its shows suck. Wheel of Time was objectively a bad show, or at best mediocre. Rings of Power, they have invested literally $1 billion into, and it does not look like it's going to be good. Even when they do stuff that's annoying from a woke perspective, from a why didn't you just make a good show here perspective, they actually tend to do quality work at Netflix. So think about, for anyone who's watched our Witcher rants, our problem with Witcher isn't that it's bad, whereas Wheel of Time is just bad. It's that it's good, but it could have been great, but it's still good.
Well, and it depends on what your evolution with Witcher is. So there's a 3-hour video with the affable gentleman you can watch, but the Cliff Notes version is, it was good for Heath because he's never seen any of the source material. It was really good for me because I've only played the 3rd video game, and where it's very obvious in the series is it's setting up for that crowd, people who played the 3rd video game. And it was not good for the affable gentleman.
Very frustrating for him.
Yeah, because he's read all the source material and played all 3 video games. So he had the most knowledge of the Witcher history.
Yeah. And as he points out,
zero knowledge, and I had the knowledge that was what I know they're leading up to.
That looks like what their target audience was. Yeah. And it was very frustrating for him, not just because he knew the changes they made, but he didn't know why they made the changes they made. And he pointed out some very specific examples
which I hope it came across is, I was kind of leading that conversation to, they made those to accelerate the process to getting to my audience.
But there were a couple of, I remember specific things he talked about of, the source material would have worked better within your show. Why did you make this change? It doesn't make any sense. And so there was some of that for sure. But despite that, and I've mentioned some other things, like Critical Drinker complained that The Witcher was a secondary character in his own show, especially in the 2nd season. And I can kind of see that. So it wasn't perfect. It wasn't great, but it was still good to really good.
The 2nd season became what Scott talked about with the characters in Wheel of Time, is you started centering things around more characters, and it just split time.
Yeah.
And when you only got 8 episodes or 10 episodes, it's really hard to split time.
Right. So the other reason, besides the fact that even when they kind of mess up, they still do a pretty good job, or an okay job, the niche Netflix seems to be carving out for itself is documentaries and anime. And we talked a little bit about this with the end of The Dragon Reborn, and we're starting to get more into it in the Shadow Rising of the World of Dreams. And the reason I texted you this yesterday is because I was reading the fight scene between Slayer and Perrin that happens at the end of the series, that is like a freaking Dragon Ball Z episode. That so much of the books lend themselves to being animated much better than they do live action. And Netflix has commissioned, they've bought stuff to be exclusive. They've also been producers for animated series, and that's one of the reasons that, so like Cowboy Bebop is the glaring example of when it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. And that's not just me, that's the fact that they canceled the 2nd season like 2.5 weeks after the 1st season went live, which is just unprecedented. So that's their one glaring example of when it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. But have you watched Arcane on Netflix? It is, I don't know anything about the source material because apparently it's based off some video game I've never played, but it is incredibly good as a series. And so,
well, this is the power of the hijacking of fandom, because you're going to you asked me about Arcane and other series, and everything is going to come up. I don't watch TV.
Yeah.
I hardly watch series. I hardly watch anything. I read books and I work, and then I go outside and do things. That's my life. If I watch a series, it's because I really, 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 really wanted to.
And
I
about
sat
once a month, you have some time to
and I
binge through it.
loved The Wheel of Time so much that
Yeah.
I sat through that crap.
Yeah.
And so if you get me to sit down and watch a series on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or any whatever it is, that's the power of the hijack. There, and this is my biggest complaint. And actually, some of the comments from Scott, he went back and watched our Woke is the Taint episode and was commenting on it. And there's so many euphemisms and parallels in that name that I thought that was perfect, because after a long day of working in the gym, my taint sometimes itches, and that's what I feel. That's what I feel about the Wheel of Time series. Is that's crotch rot right there.
So someone needs to airdrop some gold bond on the
Prime Studios. And the fact that I was so hijacked by the fact that I loved the book so much that I sat through that crap when I could have been doing everything else I do that I enjoy in life. It's just I'm not going, and I'm going to sit through season 2 because we have to have material. We have to keep this going.
We've started this, and so we're going to keep going. And because you know what, maybe it will save some people from watching it, because there are. So I've watched a couple, like Red Letter Media is one of them, and then some others I can't remember off the top of my head have talked about the Paramount Plus series Picard, and I really liked the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and there is, besides the fact that I'm not going to pay for Paramount Plus, there's no way that I would watch modern Trek because of what modern writers have do to it. But I get a lot of cathartic release listening to these people rant about how terrible it is, and it keeps me, it satiates, beyond the cathartic release, it satiates my curiosity for what's going on in these shows. So there are a number of people doing a lot of good YouTube shows on the Rings of Power, so I have no desire whatsoever to watch those. I'm not going to give the views to that. But I also wasn't, as much as I liked The Lord of the Rings, I didn't delve into that as much as I did Wheel of Time, because I read the 3 books several times, including the appendices. I tried to read the Silmarillion when I was like in 8th grade, and it was so dense I couldn't get through it. And so then I never tried anymore.
I read the Silmarillion, but I think it was when we lived together in college.
Okay.
So I think it was when you're in that duplex where the other side was condemned. Yeah. That was $120 a month or something. That was awesomely roach infested. But what do we have? Skunks living underneath at one point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was awesome, an awesome college experience. But we made money when we had football games because we were close to the stadium, so people would park in our yard. And since the grass was shit, we didn't care if they parked in the grass. But that was a side point. Where was I going? What did you just say? Oh, the Sumerian. Yeah, read that
and going ahead and watching. I'm not gonna watch Rings of Power because other people satiate my curiosity of what's going on there, because they'll make videos ranting about it. Same with like the Disney Plus shows. I watched WandaVision. I watched the first 2 seasons of the Book of Boba Fett, and then they started so strong and disappointed me so much that I said, I'm done with this. And I'll watch some of the YouTubers I watch will talk and rant about it. So that'll kind of satiate my curiosity of what's going on there. And every once in a while it'll be like, oh, hey, this was good. Okay. And all right, well, I'm not going to watch this because I'll go watch the show later.
Well, I know what I wanted to say now. So look at modern Hollywood in general. It's take something from the past, diversify it, throw it back at people, and hope to make money is what it is. And you can see the marketing involved. Look at The Mandalorian. Great example. Disney Plus. You'll never convince me to pay for Disney Plus. But everybody loved Yoda. Yoda was awesome. And even if you look at the prequels, they made him more badass, you know? And then you see it in The Mandalorian. Hey, what better? A baby Yoda makes for some great memes, but at the same time, it's
Makes
there's
for a
no
bunch of
depth.
plushies you can sell. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no depth to the series. It's throw baby Yoda out there and everybody's favorite character, Boba Fett, that was trendy, and we'll make a version of him and put them together in a show, is what it was. There was really no depth to that show.
Yeah.
So it made for some great memes. It got the fanboys in because Boba Fett and Yoda were always the favorites and make money. So now we got, what do we got? Dirty Dancing coming back out.
What?
And, yeah. So they're remaking Dirty Dancing, and the original girl is going to be an older person in the thing. And everybody's like, oh, fighting over, what are they going to do with Patrick Swayze's character? Because, you know, he's dead. And I'm like, I bet you he's black. I guarantee it. Right. Because that's what they're doing. They're taking something old that was popular, redoing it diversified, is all they're doing. There is no creativity in Hollywood right now. Something old, diversify it. And they did that with Wheel of Time.
Well, this is what happens when you destroy critical thinking. I mean, how many times did we just today, forget all the times, you know, all the episodes we've done, how many times just today did we go off on real world tangents? Just in the, what, we only got through like 3 chapters, 2 chapters? Because
we're going to have to be more efficient in the future,
yes,
by the way.
because Jordan was a critical thinker. All right. He thought deeply. Like you know, like I said at the beginning.
Not only that, is he emotionally invested himself
in
this. One thing in that Theoryland thread that I had up right there, if you just flip through that, just type in the URL that was there and you'll get all of that.
Or just go to theoryland.com and start exploring, because there's a lot of good stuff.
Harriet talked about him and characters. She was like, I knew when he was writing certain characters because of the way he was in the house. He would come home, you know, slinking around and doing these weird things. And I'm like, oh, he's writing Paid and Fame today. So it was, he immerse his emotion before he would start writing. And so that's why you get such real characters.
Yeah. So you have the combination there. So one of the things that makes, so let's take as an example, J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot, or as it's been called by some people, Bad Reboot, which I love. That's just emotion. There's no intellectual depth there. So it can entertain you for one watch through, but then it's forgettable. It's there's no true engagement there, because you're only getting those quick flashes, those quick images that make you go, ooh, shiny light. It's a fireworks show. It's a fireworks show. Kaboom, and then it's done.
So we got a one of these days we need to reintroduce ourselves, because we're getting new viewers all the time. But we got a historian and a physiologist talking about books at this moment. So let me bring my expertise into this. So that the thing I talked about with the Mandalorian, you get the guy that looks like Boba Fett and the baby Yoda, gives you this little bitty endorphin hit that makes you click next and click next and click next until until you realize it's 2 a.m, you know.
To their credit, they added a little bit of mystery in that first season. There was a little bit of unknown, right? Which is always going to make you go, oh, turn the next page, what's going to happen?
But at the same time, that little endorphin hit, you can actually get from taking a walk around the block.
Eating a bar of chocolate.
Yeah, eating a dark chocolate, or yeah, I'm not going to condone eating sweets to do this. I'm going to condone exercise, my friend. But yeah,
that's my point about the fireworks show, is that actually is probably a better analogy, is the taking a walk versus eating a piece of junk food.
So maybe the answer here is we should be, our main message in the, at least these Wheel of Time episodes, is read books instead of watching Netflix, and get some exercise instead of watching Netflix. And when we make these companies poor because they're doing a crap job just trying to play on this one little dopamine hit you get from seeing something you kind of like, maybe they'll start doing a quality product where we can not only like something, but be intellectually stimulated by it.
Be fulfilled by it.
Have a deeper sense.
That hit of junk food goes away pretty quick, and then you're left with those empty calories that make you look down at your gut and go, oh, versus if you actually get some exercise, you have more of a long-term fit. Or if you actually get out and do a productive hobby, it's like, look what I have done. Look what I have accomplished. I did this thing.
Maybe we're fighting an uphill battle, but it's the right battle to fight. We've talked about the subclinical narcissism on social media, and the contradiction that someone could say is, well, you're putting your face out there and you're looking for likes and you're looking for all this, but we're trying to supply substance.
Yeah.
And and hopefully we are. Scott, tell us if we are. And anybody else, be like Scott. If you watch this far, at least we have to be supplying substance, because we're 2 hours into this at this point.
My bladder says yes.
Yes. So if it's the difference between getting something that enriches you versus the latest TikTok trend. And who's winning the battle right now? TikTok, right? The latest person doing the latest trend that you keep flipping through, and then you flip to the next one, and then you flip to the next one, and then you hit exit, and their genius marketing campaign is you have to hit exit twice, because you hit exit and you go to another video, which might enthrall you for a few seconds, which then you hit exit again, and because you were there for a few seconds, you have to hit it again. And so it is an uphill battle, because those things that hit you momentarily are harder to beat than the thing that enriches you deep down inside, because that usually takes time. And I think that's a good place to end this, unless you had any other spoiler talk.
No, I think it's nice to end on something productive, and that is a go out and be productive kind of ending.
Yeah, I've got 45 minutes till my next client. I might go it's actually really nice outside, so I might go jump in the pool for a second. It's too hot to go just take a walk, or water the garden, one of the two.
All right, we'll see y'all next time.
See y'all next time. And again, tell us which arc you want us to go down next: Perrin, the girls, or Rand and Matt. No, we have to end with Rand and Matt. So Perrin or the girls. Perrin's probably the more interesting. So
yeah.